It's Sunday, November 23, 2025. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Weekend Show, where we make the time to consider the news of the week. You can support my work and independent journalism at patreon.com/5minutenews. Our guest today is the New York Times bestselling author of A Well-Trained Wife, her memoir of escape from Christian patriarchy. Her second book, I Belong to Me, A Survivor's Guide to Recovery and Hope After Religious Trauma, is available for pre-order now. Tia Levings, welcome back to the Weekend Show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Likewise, so many people wrote to us after your last appearance asking for more Tia, and so it's the least we can do is to invite you back. Your perspective on what's happening in America, I think, is so underreported. You see the country through this lens, this Christian fundamentalist lens, which you have successfully kind of extracted yourself from. But it does give us a lot of food for thought about some of the things that the news cycle just takes for granted, and actually you have a very different view of it. Maybe we could start with Trump signing the bill on Wednesday, directing the Justice Department to release the files from the Epstein investigation, surrendering in the face of joint pressure from Democratic opponents and Trump's own far-right Christian nationalist base. I'm kind of confused about this, and I'm sure you can look at it and go, well, he's doing it because of this, this, and this. Mm-hmm. Is there a simpler solution to this?
There's a suspicion to it. Okay. I don't trust an about face. I think timing is everything. Yeah. I think they've always known what they were going to do about this situation, and the way that the shutdown drug out, specifically to delay this vote. Yeah. And then the other things that are happening simultaneously. So anytime a Christian patriarch or a populist or a person like Trump does something like this, I always want to widen the lens and see what else is going on, what else is true. I think there's so many answers in the both and what else is true yesterday is that we had a Saudi prince, we had lots of things happening with the Senate and all of the players. We have crazy statements online today. There's a real escalation in severity, and I think the timing is part of that. There's no way he just suddenly decided to concede to this vote in Congress. I think we can all see through it that there's a big level of BS there.
Also, he's referred to it as a Democrat hoax for months now. And yet outside of the Capitol building, you have survivors of Epstein's sexual abuse who are standing up, pleading with the president to release the files, to not make it political. Many of them are Republicans and Trump voters, and they're saying, this is not about politics. How can it be a hoax when the very people at the heart of this abuse are standing outside pleading with the president?
There's so many thoughts that come up with that. Protesting too much, would they resist too much? That hoax is okay, what? You're sure putting a lot of energy into the hoaxiness of it. But also, the biggest through line with Trump's response is, I don't care. He says this I don't care line quite a bit. Caroline mimics it. She parrots that. And so I don't think he cares how many people are on the stairs. I don't think he cares anything about what's happening in Congress. He proved through the shutdown that he does not really need them in order to get anything done. And I think a big portion of the Democrats caving to get the government open again was let's not prove the point that they're not needed right now because of the way Doge and the gutting and all of this other stuff that's happened. He doesn't need that. And so when he brushes it off and he goes and he does whatever he wants, that's the thing that we need to be paying more attention to. It's almost like a separate issue. This whole, the idea of the survivors on the steps and Americans being outraged over this scandal and the extent of it. All of that is true and all of that is real in our lives. It's definitely true in my body as a sexual abuse survivor. And I can't relate it to anything that's happening with political strategy because they're exploiting every survivor as a political tool. And that's recognizable, in my cells. I understand, this is being manipulated and it's at our expense. And the people who always claim to advocate for that are participating in the traitorness. So traitorness is not really a word, is it? But betrayal. That's the word I want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are, I mean, this, as I see it, is heaped with misogyny as well. And I think Marjorie Taylor Greene has been a very interesting character in this period because she has spoken out and said that she doesn't really feel like there's a place for her in the Republican Party because they don't seem to like women. This is only dawning on her now. But at the same time, she has been really pushing for the release of the Epstein files and has kind of really taken a stand here, which I think is very interesting. She also went on TV and apologized for the toxic politics that she'd been involved in. And I thought that was a very interesting thing because he was calling her a traitor and a disgrace and all this stuff. And she basically kind of said, I think that's fair criticism. I'll just quote her. She said, I'd like to say humbly, I'm sorry for taking part in the toxic politics. It's very bad for our country. And then she said, it's something I've thought about a lot, especially since Charlie Kirk was assassinated. I'm only responsible for myself and my own words and actions, and I'm committed, and I've been working on this a lot lately, to put down the knives in politics. I just want to see people being kind to one another. Why the shift with her, do you think?
Oh, I think it's very complex. And I do have a little bit of an unpopular position when it comes to Marjorie. I feel, number one, as a cult survivor, that we have to learn to create spaces for people to step out of cult ideology. And for better or for worse, whatever Marjorie's personal motives are, she is becoming an example for MAGA to see what this looks like. This is how you change your mind when you've gotten new information. This is how you step outside of it. And there's a lot of vitriol on the left against that. They don't want to see her apologize. They don't want to see her be accepted or platformed in any way. But I think the visibility of this is one aspect of what's important. Why she's doing it? I mean, I think we have to remember that the writing on the wall was very explicit for her. Trump said he's not going to let her run for Senate. That isn't necessarily just misogyny. That's like, you're out. And so once she's out, I do believe she's somebody who would burn it down. Like, don't let it, the door hit you on the way out. Like, she's definitely going to make tracks. She's also got a primary happening, doesn't she? I mean, like, there's a lot of complex factors that would make her read the writing on the wall, abandon the sinking ship.
But having a safe place to land, as you describe it, is important, isn't it? Because anybody that wants to step outside of the toxic politics of MAGA does need to be welcomed into the alternative. And unfortunately, in this kind of two-party system that we seem to have, the Democrats is really the only place to end up.
I think Marjorie's perfect for this role because she knew eventually she would run her mouth and Trump would bite, and he did. She knew that she's creating a third space that we actually need in order to move forward. I don't think she's any risk of being like in major leadership or elected to a higher office or anything. I don't think we need to worry about that. I think what the benefit for us is that she is going to help a certain percentage of MAGA leave, change their minds. Push against it, be more vocal. I think the more that is in the air, the better off we are as a country.
So when you see her and you hear her talk, do you see a victim? Do you see somebody who is in a cult who doesn't yet have the tools to step outside of it? Is that who she is? Because, I believe we're all fundamentally good, and I've always had a bit of a soft spot for her. And I feel sorry for her in a way, because I do feel like she has been given this, growing up in this environment, she didn't really ever have a choice. And now on the national stage, she's starting to see how the world is a little different.
I'm going to both and it again. I do feel a certain amount of empathy and compassion for her. She said two things that got my attention. One was her adult children talked to her about rising insurance premiums. Yeah. And that was immediately relatable to anybody who has family that's not MAGA or adult kids. Like, they're going to get you to think about the consequences of these policies. And then just also, like, having been somebody who fell so hard for what we know was psyops and misinformation, I can't help but feel compassionate for anybody who falls for that. We are all vulnerable to it. So while she has made a total ass of herself in so many situations, I'm not a grudgy person. I'm like, what are you going to do with that new information? If you're going to help lead people out, then I'm open. I will give you that space. I mean, I'm not looking to Marjorie for any like personal friendship or leadership, but I'm also just not going to like hammer a good thing. I think good things can come from good words, and Marjorie is speaking some good words right now.
You write about how high control religion is not only shaping our families, they're also changing our politics, our laws, and our elections. Mm-hmm. And you say what many don't realize is that Christian fundamentalists want to govern our country the way they govern their homes. And no one knows that as well as the wives and the children of the patriarchs. But these citizens of fundamentalism aren't allowed to speak, and the agenda of the evangelical patriarchy is surging ahead by aligning itself with nationalism. Let's just talk to that for a moment, because it's very hard when the politics almost gets in the way of the analysis. You're so busy fighting fires with your thoughts, especially when ICE are kidnapping people off the streets and the shutdown and all sorts of things that are in our direct line of sight. But to zoom out a little bit, you see this administration and the way the country is going is kind of on a path to what the Heritage Foundation and these kind of organizations that are in charge actually want, the playbook, be it Project 2025 or other. You see that we are on track for what they are planning.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is such a carefully orchestrated strategy, long term. It's been hammered out in offices and in administrations. When they didn't win, they drilled down into these things and they were ready. They just needed all the pieces to come into place. And that is what happened with Donald Trump, gave them the populist, open door, and as well as a plethora of distractions. So there's so much high level crap for us to have to focus on. Meanwhile, it's all the whispering and mechanisms behind the scenes that are really destroying democracy. So that is like, I take them seriously. I know what it's like to live in Christian patriarchy and Christian fundamentalism. They aren't secret about these plans. They've been preaching them every Sunday in churches all over the world for 50 years. There's no reason to doubt them. They have everything, and they've shown us this is what they'll do, and they are doing it. So no one has ever shown me an example where it was like, well, they're not really going to do that one. If they do it at home, they're really going to do it. Like, they already do it. So they're just scaling it up.
An obvious example, because it is hard for some people to see the parallels if they don't have your experience. But an obvious example is the deconstruction of the Department of Education, for example. We heard this week that they're going to split the responsibilities out between other government departments so they can shut it down. In fact, they put out a video of Reagan saying that, we have to shut down the Department of Education, and then various Republican leaders talking about it. And then with a clock ticking, they go, finally, we're getting it done. As I understand it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but, this decision is born of Christian fundamentalism. This is about trying to send education back to states that are stacked in one political direction and religious direction, and also to discourage any kind of liberal teachings in public schools.
Yeah, and it's very much more extensive than we might realize. So it might seem like we're dealing with this current event, the dismantling of the Department of Education. But if we, again, pull the lens back and look at how extensive that really is, they have been thwarting progress in education for decades. And so they help create the situation that we're in as far as like a struggling education system. That is partially their fault because they've, sabotaged so many times. Then they make this self-fulfilling prophecy. Our education system needs work, needs help. And then they swoop in with their solution to their problem. So their solution is to dismantle education because they don't believe in education. And we know this again by looking at the homes. The movement was home education that stopped at 8th grade, that didn't offer education to girls, that created the situation where girls just need to be homemakers and men need to have like trades and things. There's nothing wrong with the trades, but they weren't pro higher education. And so when they look at that and they scale it, the first thing they have to do is get rid of the structures that help us maintain the status quo. And so that's really what it is. When we look at like the condition we're in today being a result of a shitty educational system, they don't have a plan to make that better. They believe in religious indoctrination from early childhood. So that is what they'll implement. And we will again have a simplified populace that can't fight back intellectually because we haven't been equipped to do that.
So people like Russ Vogt are coming at this from an extremist position, a religious extremist position. And yet the public are led to believe that it is, about democracy and democratizing education and sending it to the states. And in reality, this is a centrally decided policy.
Yeah, it's getting rid of the federal, oversight and the accountability and the things like that, going back to states' rights. And then when we get into the states' rights conversation, we are right into segregation, enslavement, all of the things pre-civil rights. I mean, that just lands us immediately right back into that spot. Right.
It's like abortion laws in various states and how people kind of travel out of state to get access to healthcare. It will end up like that in a way where people are gonna, if they can afford to move somewhere that is going to at least give them an education. I mean, that's the terrifying part of this, is if you project forward, this becomes a kind of state warfare.
And it's not, it's worse than that. I don't want to sound like doomsdayer, but you have to go a little further. It doesn't stop with state warfare. They want to then make it illegal to travel out of state for healthcare. So ultimately they don't want women leaving home, and ultimately they want to force birth. And so they will do everything in their power to reach that end. States being able to have some mobility is just a way station for them.
So interesting to me, the media will see abortion and education as two completely different topics, and yet you're able to see them as connected because of the cult that you have extracted yourself from.
And it's always important to remember that the people who need abortions in Christian patriarchy find a way to get them too. They don't live by the standards that they preach to the people.
Right.
Which is also what we're seeing in the Epstein situation. The biggest place of danger for women and children statistically is churches. Churches do not take sexual abuse seriously. They don't hold abusers accountable. They venerate Mary as a 14-year-old mother of God. They shop for wives in their church youth groups. That level of hypocrisy is mirrored in the Epstein case. So we can't turn to them for a higher standard or, as I grew up hearing, the moral majority. It doesn't exist. The morals are situational and as needed. And they are some of the most guilty offenders themselves. So
because sexual abuse and emotional abuse are fundamentally the same thing, really. The emotional abuse that people are receiving who are living in these families where it maybe hasn't got to the point of sexual abuse, or it's just different in that family, but still the trauma associated with it can last as long, and it's as serious. Yeah,
when I tell this story, my story and also other survivors, and you will see it if you sit for a second with what we're currently saturated in. It's all the abuses. Yeah. It's financial abuse. It's verbal abuse. He's calling reporters names and insulting people. Sexual abuse, financial abuse, high control, censorship, any kind of abuse to a underling is present in our cycle, and it is present in these households.
Maybe we should talk about Quiet Piggy for a moment.
Oh my word, that has been so triggering, and there's so much awful going on in the world, and I keep asking myself, what is it about the way he's speaking to female reporters that is so upsetting? And it's multifaceted. It's not just what comes out of his mouth.
Right. So for people that don't know, this was a reporter on board Air Force One, part of the press pool, the usual thing where he kind of leans out of his cupboard and answers a few questions. And he didn't want to hear a question in this case, and he silenced the female reporter with quiet piggy. Mm-hmm. I felt quite triggered by that myself. Just the idea that he... Because I was bullied in school, and to me this was like bullying at a level that was so clearly from the playground, that use of language. And I actually thought of the character Piggy from Lord of the Flies. I'm sure that's not what he was thinking of, but that's what I was thinking of. And it was very clear to me that his inner child had come to the fore in this moment, and that he is petulant and he is a bully, and you know, he was tired and he just couldn't help himself.
Yes, and that press pool is partially influencers and not journalists, and he habitually abuses them and insults the networks that they're from, and is disproportionately, I think almost exclusively, hard on the female reporters that are in the room. That is definitely nurtured by the misogyny of the entire administration, the entire system. But when he did it, you know, his body language came forward and he shook his finger, and he was it was the top down intimidation body language. It really was this moment that encapsulated the entire problem. It was right there. Then the level of disrespect was just appalling. And then to not have an outcry from other journalists defend her. And I do think that they also issued misinformation on the right by calling her name Peggy, and it's not Peggy. It was right. Catherine. So you know, like, there's a lot of things happening in this moment.
Well, the fact they think people will buy that is right. It's so infuriating. Like, how stupid do they think people are? Maybe they think everyone's as stupid as they are. I mean, there's always
back
that
to education. They
right.
know people will believe what they sell.
Interestingly, we heard rumors that White House officials were discussing this week about this Paramount Skydance acquisition of Warner Brothers Discovery, which basically means that they'd be buying CNN, with Larry Ellison being the largest shareholder of Paramount. And apparently the behind-the-scenes conversations were who Donald Trump didn't like on CNN and who he could fire and replace as part of, you know, sanctioning this deal. And names were coming up, people that Trump loathes, like Erin Burnett and Breonna Keeler. Women, invariably.
Women.
Right? And so it kind of goes back to the same thing: control, setting the agenda, leaving the women out of the equation.
And not just women who refuse to fawn to him. They refuse to fawn and kiss up, and they're intelligent and they're provocative with their questions, and they don't bend easy, and they're not, you know, like a bottle blonde with the MAGA aesthetic. And there's a lot, you know, there. But that's a horrifying acquisition, actually.
Yes, true. It's so interesting, isn't it, that when he gets a question that he doesn't like, his childlike use of language that is a horrible question.
Shame.
Now, how do you associate a question? What is a horrible question? I mean, it's like, it doesn't make sense. It's like him reverting to childhood again, like being put on the spot. I think he deep down knows that he's not smart, and I think he's having to kind of deal with that. Look, I've landed the presidency, and I'm literally one of the dumbest people in America. And so anything that he can do to prevent people from seeing through his cover is what he goes for.
Also, in a religious context and from a religious background, to bring in that shame on you voice and that shame on you polarization. There's something in religion called spiritual bypassing, and it's where we just kind of gloss over anything that might be negative, or bring up a character trait that we don't like, or bring up a conversation that we don't like. You don't want to air somebody's dirty laundry. You don't want to talk about things that are harsh or accountable. And so that is a horrible question, immediately sequesters it over here into this category of the things we don't talk about, the things we don't bring up. And how dare you bring up this subject matter, because now I have to talk about something I don't like. Right.
And we had that with the Crown Prince and the question about Jamal Khashoggi, where a female reporter said, you know, that the U.S. security services had concluded that it was Mohammed bin Salman that had sanctioned the assassination of this journalist. And Trump was like, how dare you bring that up? And this guy's got nothing to do with it. Right? And
ruin his good time. Right. He was having such a good time with that prince. I mean, he laughed so hard he knocked his dentures loose. He doesn't want to bring up real things in the middle of that. Yeah. You know? Yeah. Absolutely a shame on you moment.
I was very struck by how telling that was, because, I mean, to have that Saudi prince in the Oval Office is a total break with protocol and you know, the security of the United States, not least selling them planes that they can share the data of with China and whoever else. But that aside, it's very clear that Trump might ban all Muslims from entering America, but if you're a multi-billionaire and you're a crown prince, then come on in.
Yes, money and attention always. I mean, that's true for churches too. Like I see consistency there. And
I suppose, Saudi Arabia is a good example of repression of women. Maybe that's the reason why Trump gets on with MBS, is because they have that in common. And whilst the Crown Prince recently allowed women to drive cars in Saudi Arabia, he doesn't allow them to have a voice, to protest freely. He imprisons them for minor things. And maybe Trump feels an affinity with that.
Probably. I mean, it's role assignment, rules for women, keeping them in a box, keeping them in a tight lid on any kind of equality. I would believe that. So
do you think the US under Trump, because we're only a year almost into this presidency, you have 3 more years of this shit, Tia, that we're going to have to deal with together.
Maybe.
Right? I'm grateful for your optimism. But the just talking about the trajectory to where things are going, obviously now we're starting to kind of get these hints of how misogyny and the patriarchy is playing a central role in policy making. But the trajectory, like, what's the end game for them with this? Because, I worry every day I wake up and I'm like, what are we dealing with today? What's coming our way today? And, this week I was mainly affected by the news that 1.3 million people could die because of Trump's climate rollbacks. They've studied it and they've worked out. And, that makes Trump one of the kind of biggest mass murderers on the planet. And this is all baked into this Project 2025 plan for undoing everything that has gone before and taking us back to a kind of 1930s, 1950s time. 30s less, because they could probably do without the Great Depression, although there's a rumor that thing might be coming back again. Where do you think, and again, you said you didn't want to be kind of negative about it, but that is the reality here, is it is not a very optimistic outlook.
No, the reality is that it is dire. We absolutely have to pay attention to it because this is the path that we're on. And without interference from, people standing up against it and resistance, this is where we will go. I think widening the lens even to the mid-1800s, this giant reaction that they're having against awakening, against enlightenment, against science, all of that secularism and the separation of church and state and all of that threatens the religious hold. And so they have been reacting against that the entire previous century. And this is where they've finally gotten us, is this chance to undo and overcorrect what they think went wrong, which keeps their empire. They really don't care if a lot of people die. That's not something that they mind, because the people who will die are the people that they don't want to have to provide for or be bothered with anyway.
Yes.
Those numbers will disproportionately be poor, minority, and people of color. So they don't care. They don't. That's not,
Which is why they haven't got a healthcare plan, because.
Oh, exactly. There's not going to be any healthcare or SNAP in the patriarchy.
Yeah.
They'll let you starve. They have historically always done that.
Explain to people how they qualify, the Christian teachings, traditional Christian teachings of feeding the poor and providing sanctuary to people in need, versus them not wanting to continue SNAP benefits, versus even going to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court saying, no, you don't have to give the poor any food. Trump cannot get his head around the fact that people cannot afford to eat. It's not on his. Is it that it's not on his radar, or is there an intentional movement behind it, as you say, to simply eradicate the poor and minorities?
Well, when it comes to Trump, I would not be surprised if the information that he is fed on a daily basis isn't even real.
Yeah.
It would be very easy to persuade somebody like that with his fascination of AI videos, for example, and really convince him of whatever reality that they want him to represent. So if we take that and put that on the shelf over here, and then come back to how Christians could do this, they do not ascribe so much to the teachings of Jesus. It is Old Testament theonomy. I think we maybe got into that in our first interview a little bit. So this Old Testament carryover is harsher. It is very much us, them. And they'll go ahead and like, okay, Jesus said to feed the poor, but he just meant the poor like us, the Christian poor. And they will feed the poor within their churches and call that good. It's this interesting experiment that's been circulating online with the baby formula, happened in between our interviews, where this TikToker called all these churches and asked if they would pay for formula for her baby. And I think only 9 out of 33 churches said that they could help. They don't believe in helping the worldwide poor or the countrywide poor. They don't believe in social safety nets and the rising tide raises all ships, like let's have a community for good. And this mindset will impact like what they think about public school and food and healthcare and like our highways or our climate, anything that is something we all enjoy as a thriving society. That is not their vision. They don't want a thriving society where everybody is benefiting. They want an exclusive elite belief-based belonging. So it's ideologically opposed from the very core. And
I felt the same with the closure of USAID as well. Exactly the same thing. I mean, forget the soft power and how the US benefits, the net benefit from that. It was almost as if they didn't just not have the data, but there was a cruelty, a level of cruelty associated with that, knowing that tens of millions of people of color invariably would die.
They don't see it that way. This, like, when we get into the heads of these people, and I count myself in that because I was raised in it and I was in this cult, so I know what they think on the inside. They look at it as kind of a spiritual mandate. This is the way that we handle the world, and those people, you'll hear it, like if they worked harder, then they would be able to eat. Yeah. If they did for themselves, they would be able to eat. The same group will justify spanking their babies, their infants, or denying their own children food because they believe they're teaching a lesson through this deprivation. And scarcity and deprivation is a very big part of their faith. So when they look at, there's a lot of starving children and the world was supposed to feed it, they don't feel any responsibility to provide that food. They think they're helping the situation by creating the tough love and not buffering a solution, by letting everybody starve and then go figure it out. Like that's not going to happen for little children that are dependent on world food. But they've told themselves that, the creative ones will rise to the top. I mean, it makes my stomach sick just to think about it because I know what those camps look like. That's the American dream
as well, what you're describing.
Right, capitalism. Yes,
it's baked into this marketing campaign for the US. Right? Yes. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Exactly,
tough
love.
Hard, and then you can have a perfect little house with a picket fence and and
they go hard.
The driveway.
Empathy is weak. Compassion is weak. Like they're really working hard to reject those things that might move their hearts and move their minds with some empathy and compassion.
We have to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to talk about your journey out of this cult of Christian fundamentalism and how people watching who maybe feel that they are themselves stuck can find a way out. We'll do that next on The Weekend Show. Have you ever found the perfect item online, a couch or a lamp, and then you see the sticker price and it reminds you that it's out of reach for your budget? Well, that's why I use dupe.com. It's simple. Just type dupe.com / before any product URL, and Dupe instantly shows you similar and more affordable alternatives. It's perfect for finding the best deals for your holiday shopping. And these aren't sketchy knockoffs. The truth is, most products that you see online, from furniture to fashion to gadgets, are mass-produced in the same factories. Brands just slap on different labels and markups. Well, Dupe surfaces those same pieces for way less, so you're not overpaying just for a name. That expensive sofa, handbag, or light fixture you've been eyeing, Dupe finds them, or something nearly identical, for a fraction of the price. It's no wonder that Dupe has gone viral on TikTok. Millions of people already use it to save thousands on furniture and decor, sometimes 60, 70, or even 80% off, and it's completely free. This holiday season, Dupe is giving away 1 million Dupe points, and you can turn those points straight into gift cards. Here's how it works. You earn Dupe points just by shopping with Dupe. No payment, no catch. Just search for the products you want, save money, and rack up points. Want even more? Share Dupe with your friends. They save, you earn points. That means more gift cards for both of you. And here's the kicker. For a limited time, the first 10,000 people who go to dupe.com/weekend will get 500 Dupe points instantly. Redeemable for gift cards, no catch. But spots are limited, so don't wait. That's dupe.com/weekend for 500 free Dupe points today. Use your Dupe points and gift cards to make the most of your holiday shopping. Go to dupe.com/weekend. Debt from credit cards isn't an accident. It's a system designed to keep Americans down. The banks profit, the creditors win, and families lose. Every call, every fee, every high-interest trap is another reminder that the game is rigged. But there is another side to the story. PDS debt has already helped hundreds of thousands fight back, cutting debt, ending the calls, and putting money back where it belongs, in Americans' pockets, not the banks. Whether you're struggling with credit cards, personal loans, or medical bills, PDS Debt has custom options to help you get out of debt. They go beyond the numbers to understand your unique financial situation and craft a personalized plan designed just for you. There's no minimum credit score required. They're here to help you save more, pay off your debts faster, and start putting money back where it belongs, in your pocket. PDS Debt is A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, boasts thousands of 5-star reviews on Google, and holds a 5-star rating on Trustpilot. Why? Because PDS Debt has helped hundreds of thousands of people get out of debt. It's your money. It's your future. Don't let the system decide it for you. You're 30 seconds away from being debt-free. Get your free assessment and find the best option for you right now at pdsdebt.com/weekend. That's pdsdebt.com/weekend. pdsdebt.com/weekend. When you start a podcast, it seems like you have to figure it out all by yourself. Script, setup, filming schedule, logos. It can be super overwhelming, and every day seems to introduce a new decision that needs an answer. When you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can start to begin to overrun your life. So finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. And for millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the e-commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. You can get started with your own design studio with hundreds of ready-to-use templates. Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand's style. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/weekend. Go to shopify.com/weekend. Shopify.com/weekend. We're back on the Weekend Show with Tia Levings. I'm Anthony Davis. Tia, you wrote, "Because I am one of them, once a woman who chose against herself to perpetuate their system. When I was excommunicated and shunned and then escaped the violence with my life and my children, I made myself a promise. I'd tell my story one day. I'd tell as many who would listen what it's really like to live in fundamentalism, because stories like mine offer insight to where America is heading." We talked a little bit about where it's heading, and it is kind of doomsday if these kind of MAGA Republicans continue to kind of push forward with these extremist policies. But for you as an individual, and for other people who might just be waking up because of the political landscape to realizing that they are in this cult too, and even just, I mean, outside of religion, they might not be in a religious household, but they might be in a Republican household that is claiming that climate change isn't real and various things. Where do we start in terms of recognizing that we are in it before we can start to look to how we get out of it?
That's a great question. And in my story, what I try to remind people is that this was a process. This discovery process isn't, I don't think I've ever heard anybody share that it is like an instantaneous turning. I had a 7-year turning. My mind started to change with personal tragedy. And then it took 7 more years for me to get my body and my children out. And the thing that consistently I was beating up against all the time was that the results, and the Bible would say the fruit of this belief system, doesn't match the result. And so, like, if you're not sure that you're in an ideological cult of any kind, you can always compare what are the actual results of this belief system versus what they tell me it will be. Because cults and high control groups will always tell you that it's your fault if you get a different result. It's never their system's fault. And they always recruit and lead with the ideal. So they're preaching the ideal. They're telling you this is going to solve all your problems. This is the thing we need to do in order to make America great again, for example. And then the consequence of that choice does not match what they promised. It is the families. It's the people, the lay people who are holding the bag in that situation. You're the ones with the destroyed families, the children who are suffering, the women who are breaking, the men who have way more on their shoulders than they were ever supposed to carry. Those real results are the things that got my attention and taught me that whether they're right or wrong, I can't do it anymore. I wasn't willing to do it anymore. And in my story, it almost resulted in murder, suicide, a big harrowing escape. I don't want people to have to wait that long, before you make your exit from the highway. I could have and should have left sooner and more safely, and that would have impacted my recovery process if I'd been able to do that. I was just really dug in that I could make it better. The longer I stayed, the more I could help. And that's part of the conditioning within Christian patriarchy. They're always telling women that, if you're sweeter, if you smile pretty, if you serve your husband, if you submit, if you're a good homemaker, good trad wife, all these things, that you will be able to turn the faith of your husband. You will improve your situation. Again, not true. There are some problems that a sweet spirit can't fix and never was supposed to. And so my escape, was narrow. It was very narrow. But I probably would have only told that story as a nice, quiet memoir if it hadn't been coming for the entire country on such a large and aggressive scale, where I knew, oh my goodness, like, if I don't start talking about it, like, I don't know what kind of difference I'll make. But I know that I will at least have relieved myself of the burden of knowing that I know what's coming and I didn't say anything. Like, that was much more unsustainable for me than any discomfort there is in telling the story.
We see these supposed perfect MAGA families that they present. Not aside from the Mar-a-Lago set, who are obviously, high net worth individuals who all go to the same plastic surgeon.
Yes.
But there is this kind of fake perfection that we often see held up as an example of doing the right thing. What's it like to kind of be in a family where you are expected to hold the line and to give the impression that everything is perfect and that you are a kind of model family, when behind the scenes the real kind of difficult stuff is going on?
Yeah. There's a real lighthearted, common example that people might relate to, is this idea that everyone's getting dressed up for church and they're fighting the whole way. And then they get out of the car at church and everybody smiles. It's a little bit like that. You are in a constant, never-ending PR campaign, always aware that the example that you're setting is part of the evangelism of the lifestyle. So you can't have a divorce. You can't have ugly family secrets being aired. You can't have wayward children or people who don't fit the mold very well.
Right.
You have a responsibility to fit that shiny image that we see in the propaganda, where mom and dad and the beautiful children are all smiling and they match, and this is the nuclear family, and they go to church every Sunday, and dad works hard, and mom smiles and serves cookies, and you're constantly trying to, project that out as this is possible. And it's true. I did all those things. I did make cookies. We did go to church every Sunday. Our children were beautiful. But there's also the both and. What else is true? There was a lot of suffering behind the scenes. There was a lot of mess and struggle. So all of that has to be glossed over in a way that's eventually not sustainable. Eventually it all cracks.
So let's talk about what that reality looks like. I mean, from my own experience, knowing people in similar situations where they create this kind of perfect model family, but secretly dad is gay. Secretly dad is having multiple affairs with, people of various genders. And yet, it's no coincidence that in the Republican Party there's like no openly gay Congress people, Well, there was one, but they got rid of him. And he just got a pardon, so amazing. But so tell us about the reality of what people are feeling, who people really are, that are putting on this brave face, putting on this show, this production. But what is that real struggle?
That real struggle is really starting to show at this point. We have a survivor movement in the ex-evangelicals. We have people coming out of the Catholic Church and the Mormon Church telling their stories, and they're all the same story. Sexual corruption, I'll just check the sexual offenders list and you'll see how many pastors are on there,
yes.
Youth pastors and men who had easy proximity to children at church. And parents bringing their children to church because they think it's a safe, good, wholesome place. When again, the evidence would not support that. The evidence would support between survivor testimony and the actual registry, that's one of the most dangerous places you can take a child, especially leave a child unattended in a classroom full of, pedos, that are looking for a 14-year-old bride. So like the cracks are there. That's at the church level and the household level. You have, everything from neurodiverse kids that don't fit the mold, spanking that is just extreme, discipline that's extreme, psychiatric problems that go unaddressed. I had all of the above in my family, medical hardship, intentional poverty. My husband wasn't mentally organized enough to handle this amount of responsibility that the patriarchy puts on men, denies them an equal partner because women aren't allowed to show up as a helpmate. They call it a helpmate, but you're not allowed to show up in your strength and power as a woman. You have to stay subservient. So it's just like he has an extra child to be responsible for before God. And men crack. These are the incels that we talk about, in the manosphere and the podcast network and everything. Those guys, imagine those guys with a quiver full of children and they're now supposed to be the responsible head of household. Right. They don't have the capacity for that.
Well, they're like big kids, aren't they?
Exactly. And that's propped as, we don't want them to feel lonely. We don't want them to be uncomfortable. You got to serve your man. But, that has consequences in a relationship when you're not in a relationship with another adult, facing adult problems and navigating an adult world. You're psychologically and emotionally stunted.
And this is why domestic violence is so prevalent too, because with men who just can't handle the responsibility as you describe, but also the emotional needs of a family, being everything to everybody and putting on a brave face for the outside world and being secretly gay. I'll just throw that one in as well. I mean, after a while, it takes its toll.
Yes. I mean, we had an example of that with Trump in the piggy comment. Yeah. Like he can't handle that discomfort. So what did he do? He immediately abused somebody. And the same thing happens in the family unit. They can't handle that amount of stress. And so they abuse the person. And then you add generational patterns to that, and psychiatric patterns and wounds, attachment wounds. It is a recipe for disaster. And that's why I think we have to talk about it, because that's what the movement reveals over and over again, a very replicatable disaster.
Trump this week called for 6 Democratic lawmakers to face arrest and trial after they made a video encouraging US service members and members of the intelligence community to refrain from following orders if it meant breaking the law. He posted, "It's called seditious behavior at the highest level." And he said, "Each one of these traitors to our country should be arrested and put on trial. Their words cannot be allowed to stand. We won't have a country anymore. An example must be set." And then the kind of Christian nationalist speaker, mini MAGA Mike Johnson, then defended Trump's declaration, saying that some congressional Democrats engaged in sedition after Trump suggested that they should be executed. Is this an example of what you were just saying, that this kind of, the ping back is actually far more powerful? So instead of being able to reason and to critically think about a situation, just to kind of go full in, and in this case, demand the execution of your opponents.
Yeah, that's an escalation. That's not new information.
Yeah.
We had Pence with the hanging on January 6th. Yeah. We had Pastor Joel Webbin, who's this big patriarchal podcaster. He's not as big as he thinks he is, but he's prominent enough, calling for public executions. Charlie Kirk calls for public executions. So this is just the next level of the same pattern. And they have talked about this in churches for decades, of this is how you handle your opponents. And it is historically how the patriarchy handled it. So they're not progressing from any kind of, we've learned that lesson. It didn't work. It wasn't pretty. Let's do something different. They don't learn from those mistakes. They like to repeat them. So if we want to go back to the way we handled those things back when there were public executions of your political opponents, which is probably pre-American Revolution, okay, but that's not the vision I want for America, and I don't think that's what the majority wants.
Yeah, I mean, it's ironic that Trump comes up with this idea for executions the day after he meets with the Saudi crown prince.
Isn't it?
Right?
Isn't that ironic?
But this is my fear of this escalation of authoritarianism.
Right.
Just to explain how authoritarianism, as demonstrated by Donald Trump, relates to authoritarianism in a Christian fundamentalist home.
Yeah, I have a hard time deciding which one's worse, because Trump is erratic, and as an authoritarian, he's all over the place, but he has enablers who have created a system where his word is going to rule the household, just like at home.
Yeah.
In Christian fundamentalism, you have pretty intelligent people making those same authoritarian positions and status. And so they're going to be smarter about it, therefore more dangerous in some ways. But then, he has nuclear codes and he's ultimately there. So it's almost like pick your poison. It's the same thing. It's authoritarianism denies any kind of checks and balance, any kind of decorum and pause. Like, let's think about this and examine. The lack of checks and balances should alarm us all, and it has always alarmed me in the watching the press fall, which we've been talking about tonight. And the court, of course, and Congress was shut down, and what really happened? I think they've already rendered so much of that null, which makes it theater.
Yes. I mean, this is the problem, is that once things get broken, it's very hard to put them back together again, as I see it. And, the shutdown allowed Trump to fire a whole bunch more federal workers, and those people will not be replaced. They'll be replaced by automation or by AI. But these kind of jobs that he describes are just not coming back. And so there's always this hypocrisy, this contradiction of, jobs, jobs, jobs. But actually, there is no tangible job for anybody. And the trajectory of technology is such that, humans are going to be left out of the equation. I think, as I see it, they're kind of fine with that. They're basically lying about the fact that they want people to be put to work. They don't care.
They don't care. These people ideologically seek a return to enslavement. So if technology helps them achieve that through a class war, they're okay with that.
And is this just a rich poor thing? I mean, is it about the wealthy, rich, white Christian nationalist versus everybody else? But the exception to the rule is Mohammed bin Salman can come into the party, even though he's like the opposite of everything we stand for, because he is stinking rich, and he can make us rich.
For now, I think, yes, I think this is at the end of the day all about the same power and empire that it has always been. And the Christian fundamentalists, at least, have made their allies where they need to for as long as they need to. For example, they brought in the Catholics in order to have the single issue voting with abortion. But in their worldview, Catholics are not really Christian and they will not be sharing the ultimate podium. So I would assume from experience that it's the same thing with the Arabs. They will go ahead and make that announcement or that alliance when they need to. But ultimately, there's only going to be white Christians in dominion, in the apocalypse, in the, their whole worldview, which they are not secret about. They don't share that stage. That's not a three men on top kind of thing.
Let's just dive a little deeper into that worldview, because I'm not sure that people really quite understand where this ends up and how Israel is connected, and there's this kind of whole rebirth, and just explain what that is. I don't necessarily believe that Trump subscribes to it, because he's not really a man
he's not smart enough
of
no.
God or smart enough. He,
right.
And I guess it does sound like he thinks he's going to live forever, despite his ankles and everything else. But it's the people around him, including people like J.D. Vance, for example, who are looking for this kind of absolutism.
It's all a means to an end. And I am of the camp that I don't even think that the men at the top really believe what they're using to convince the people. I think a lot of sincere people in churches, in these belief groups, do think that this is what's going to happen, and they do support it. They think it's God's will and the best interpretation of the Bible. But I'm not so sure that the men in charge really believe that. Interestingly enough, one of the Epstein leaks was this email from Bannon, and he very clearly says there's the Christian nationalist end of it and the I'm forgetting what the other one is, but it was basically they have these two filters that they'll use if they need to in order to motivate the people. So this worldview is this idea that Christ is going to come again, and there's going to be Armageddon, and 144,000 Jewish people will be spared and the rest will be annihilated. And ultimately Christians will be on the throne. There's this time with the Antichrist and the 7-year tribulation. But ultimately, at the end of the day, it is a new heaven and a new earth for white Christians. And it's a controversial interpretation of Revelation. It's awfully convenient for the people who happen to be in charge. And this is also if you heard the recent scare about the rapture, this idea that Jesus was going to come again and take them out of the tribulation so they don't have to feel the hard part. And then you get to come back 7 years later and do the thing. So, yeah, I mean, it's all of course they want, there's things that have to happen in Israel that trigger the second coming of Christ. So they have to be there. There has to be a new temple. There's criteria. But ultimately they don't care if the entire region gets razed, because it's going to be, it's
well, that's what I was going to say. Yeah. That's why their view of the Gaza conflict is very different to what, people living in reality might see it as. Repentance plays a big part in religion. And for those of us who don't subscribe to organized religion, we don't really get the opportunity to repent or go into the confession box, or do we have to take responsibility for ourselves in the moment? When I look at little MAGA Mike Johnson doing his, he reminds me of a ventriloquist doll. I think I said that before, the idea that he is being puppeteered by others at all times.
Yes.
He, I think, is the kind of person that has managed to qualify in his mind how he can kind of get away with saying these things and supporting Trump to the bitter end. And that's why he was so kind of upset about the vote in the Senate, the unanimous vote to release the Epstein files, because he knew he was going to get an earful from his supreme leader. How does repentance play a role in this kind of family unit? Is it the case that you can do terrible things, but as long as you kind of make that deal with God, that everything will be okay and you will be relieved of those issues?
Kind of. I want to give you a different way to think about repentance, because we all do it when we think about it this way. Repentance is just a turning. You change your mind when you're given new information. So we repent of things all the time because we learn things and we go, oh, actually, I don't want to do that. I don't want to continue doing that. So I'm going to repent of my ways and go this other way. That doesn't happen in high control Christian fundamentalism. The only time they apologize is when they're caught and when they're in trouble, when the consequence is there. My take on Mikey's panic when he found out about that vote, I think what I read on his face was actually of how deep he's in. Like I think he sold his soul so deeply, and he doesn't spend a lot of time on camera, indicating that. But in that moment where his mask fell and it was like an, oh fuck moment, like, I can't believe that this is what I'm party to.
Yes.
I think back a long time ago, Mike Johnson was probably a very sincere person, and he has made systemic little steps constantly to get to the stature that he's in, the position that he's in. And I think it's requiring something of him more than he can handle. And there is not a repentance for people like that, unless they lose everything, maybe on his deathbed. Like the stakes have to be so high.
What's in it for him? I don't understand. I mean, it doesn't seem to be like a desire, whereas Trump wants great riches. I don't think it's that with Mike Johnson. So what is the benefit to being in the middle of this shit show for him?
It's always the same for beta men and for women who have any level of visibility. It's proximity to power for safety. He believes the closer he is to the power source, the safer he will be. That's what makes him a weasel. That's why we detect that weasel energy from him, because he is willing to do anything he needs to in order to be close to the top. He knows he's never going to be the top. He's a beta. Women, same thing. Like Erica Kirk's an example. Like she likes to talk tough, like she's going to be a leader, but women don't lead in the patriarchy. So they're either going to reframe Turning Point to reach the woman sphere and make her audience female, or she's going to fade from relevance because there's no place for a woman to serve at the top. That's not going to happen.
Did you see the interview between Nick Fuentes and Tucker Carlson? It's caused all sorts of responses and reactions in the MAGA Republican movement, and I'm sure also in that kind of Christian fundamentalist movement as well. Mm-hmm. Some of his use of language. He was rallying against what he identifies as the perils of feminism, non-white immigration, and organized Jewry, he said. He's praised Hitler. He's compared the Holocaust to baking cookies. But he's also criticizing Republican leadership, including Donald Trump's perceived insufficient radicalism. And so Fuentes is, pushing his own extreme agenda. And in the interview, they were talking about their mutual disdain for Christian Zionists. And it kind of underscored this theological and political fissure on the American right, specifically concerning the role of faith and foreign policy. Did you sense that? And could you work out which side of this argument Nick Fuentes is even on?
I think Nick's biggest use is that he will test our tolerance. He shoots his mouth. What's it called? The Overton window. Yeah. He tests those out and shocks us, but then we're a little less shocked the next time that we hear it. Same thing with the public executions. We're a little less shocked when we've already heard it several times. So that's my number one takeaway with him. Everything else kind of fits under that category because he's testing to see which buttons get pushed, where we're shocked. He can brush it off as just being, his little froggy groiper or whatever, and downplay it and dismiss it and not be held truly accountable. Tucker Carlson's different category, right? He's got a lot more gravitas in his career. And so for him to co-sign onto that, that was where the alarm was for me. And then of course, Kevin, the head of Heritage Foundation's buy-in and underscore of that. Yeah.
Kevin
Defense
Roberts.
Yeah, exactly. Kevin Roberts, co-sign of Tucker Carlson and support of him. That's where the chills came for me. It's like the system is going to support that. And so it's real easy to look at somebody like Nick and downplay his role. Less so the head of the Heritage Foundation.
Well, I think he's since issued an apology claiming that it was a mistake to have done that. But
whatever.
Only after public outcry,
Exactly.
I presume. But it's interesting, Nick Fuentes, at the beginning of that interview, he did admit that, when he was in school, he wasn't getting much attention, so then he started saying crazy and terrible things, and suddenly he got the attention, and he was like, oh, hang on, this is a thing. And so he admitted that this is manufactured, and it's basically given him his notoriety. And I suppose it's the notoriety that is more important than the actual detail of the beliefs.
Yes, and especially in a society that doesn't hold people accountable for the consequences of their actions.
Right.
The fruit of his work isn't good, so he should be held to that. Instead, he's allowed to continue being behind a microphone and platformed in ways that are actually dangerous and do have outcomes that we will be contending with. I think it's really irresponsible on our part.
First Amendment, you see, where I'm from, that
right.
would fall under hate speech law.
Oh, he can say it. Yeah, exactly. The hate speech law is important.
Yeah.
And also protecting his right to say things. That doesn't mean he gets to say them from a stage.
Right. We have a similar thing at the moment in the UK with the leader of the far right who has apparently was polled recently, and if there was an election this week, he would actually win the election and become the Prime Minister of the UK. A horrible creature called Nigel Farage, who's friends with Donald Trump, supposedly, although I think it's a bit of a one-way friendship. But people now are coming out saying that they were at school with this guy, and he was a racist Nazi bully as a child. Now, he's denied these things, but there are multiple individuals now who were bullied by Nigel Farage in childhood. And it really made me think about how young a lot of these extremist views are instilled and perpetuate. They were saying he was 11 and he was 12 and he was behaving in this way and abusing the Jewish kids, saying, you should have all been gassed and all of this stuff. Hitler was right, that famous phrase that, Fuentes loves too. Mm-hmm. I mean, how are children being indoctrinated? And, Farage is in his 60s, right? So this was happening decades ago.
Right.
Children being indoctrinated into a political worldview at such a young age. Is that something that is very prevalent in these fundamentalist families?
It's core to the design, as are attachment wounds and the proliferation of whatever generationally was happening. So, of course we would want to look at this guy's parents and say what's going on here, but indoctrination is so intentional and it starts at birth. It is coupled with discipline and things that suppress your actual expression. So it replaces your child development in all your actual development stages. This kind of is probably not where you were going with it, but this is what I had to contend with when I came out of the cult, is that I looked like an adult, but I had been indoctrinated. So I hadn't actually developed to the place of an adulthood, the maturity and the actualization of that. And so I had to rebuild a sense of self. And when I look at men like this, I think you have no sense of self. You've had no real accountability. You have no attachment. We all think they have mommy issues because they probably do. Donald Trump had atrocious parents.
Yes.
We are definitely seeing the result of his early childhood manifest itself in his adulthood. So if we want to stop these cycles, it does actually matter that we do our trauma work and that we actually pay attention to the attachment bonds that our children have and their psychological health, because that actually helps them become a human being that can handle discomfort and be accountable for their behaviors. That's how we actually change the cycle and break this pattern.
Right. Because in the book, this is your intention, is to break the cycle, is to give people the information. And that's why, the tragic story of Virginia Giuffre taking her own life, but being, being abused by Jeffrey Epstein, being part of this child sex trafficking ring at the hands of Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And it's her book, actually. In the same way that your book has been so exposing, her book has really changed the game for people's analysis of how serious this is and was, which is why Trump considering a commutation of Ghislaine Maxwell's sentence, her 20-year sentence for this being at the heart of this ring, is just so difficult to comprehend. She kept coming into toxic relationships through her life, even once she kind of became an adult. Is that what you're describing, where your childhood is taken away, your ability to function as an adult is taken away, and so you end up kind of meeting the same person over and over again.
Yeah, and there's a shame that society likes to put on it, that something's wrong with you, that you're just like a predator magnet, or, you're just a train wreck. We have all kinds of derogatory ways to say it, but in reality, you're replaying these same patterns over and over again. You're vulnerable to high control until you fix that wound. I knew, and I had experienced in my first few years out, that I was very vulnerable to being exploited by someone who wanted to control or even benevolently save me. That doesn't mean they were doing things in my best interest. They were definitely serving their own. So in order to be resilient and less vulnerable, I had to heal to a place where I was a actualized person who understood my own autonomy and could take responsibility for myself as an adult. That isn't what happens when you're in a continual cycle of complex trauma. You do just go from one handler to another handler because you're going to constantly play those patterns out. It's where your nervous system feels safe. Like you know how to operate with a person like that. And so you can get reattached to someone who, just feels familiar and safe. That's what you know how to navigate. And so it goes on and on till it doesn't.
Just describe the process of healing. I know that it would take us 3 or 4 conversations to even get close to it, but just for people who may be watching or listening who recognize these similar patterns, recognizing that you're in it and then wanting to get out, but the healing that you described that took 7 years, as you say, what does that look like?
It looks like a lot of fierce self-advocacy. In Well-Trained Wife, I tell a story of how I got to a place where I realized no savior was coming for me, that I needed to save myself. If anybody else was going to save my kids, I was the only other adult in the room. It was going to have to be me. I kind of thought when I left, excuse me, that was it. Like I had done my big heroic act and now I would be saved in a different way. People would take care of me and, life would be soft because I had already done this hard thing. And that's actually not true. Like I said, I was vulnerable to a high control again. I didn't know how to navigate an adult world. I looked 33 with 4 children, but I felt more like a child, more like a young, teenager than I did an adult that knew how to do adult things, even like bank accounts and things like that were practical. And so I had to get to a place where I realized if this trauma pattern that took my childhood and my youth and every good thing that had happened in all of that time, if I was going to put a stop to that and not let it have my entire life so that I do end up, suicidal or in some other kind of tragedy, it was going to have to come up to me too. So I was in a place where thankfully the language and the tools were being developed to identify religious trauma and cult groups. Like this is the time to come out. Like people are talking about cults. They're talking about deprogramming and how to rebuild your self identity and autonomy and stuff. And so I had language and I had therapists that were learning. And sometimes I was on the more demanding front side of that. My therapist didn't always know what I was asking for. And some of the modalities were brand new that we were trying, but I was game for all of it. I was like, if it's going to make me healthy and able to function and do the things that I still wanted from my life, I still, had dreams and aspirations. I have a thing I say, trauma took my past. It doesn't get my present and future too. And the only person who can stop that is me. I'm the only person who can say, I'm not going to repeat that pattern. I'm going to do something different. If I'm not able to do that, what do I need to do in order to become able? Which I spent a lot of time in that place because you have to address all this trauma and these reactions and the way that your nervous system acclimates to abuse, getting it to regulate. I didn't understand nervous system regulation as a child and as a young person, and so that's actually I don't have a religion that I claim right now, but I definitely protect my nervous system quite a bit. Physical health, all of it. It turned out to be a comprehensive life makeover. That is never ending, but that's part of being an adult. Like having your life means that you're responsible for yourself, and we meet our challenges as they present. And so it was more of a 10-year process to get to that place. And writing the book was a piece of that because it was the bravery to put it on the page, the proof, the truth on the page.
Well, we are grateful to you and for the book, which is a gift. I wish you luck with the next
Thank
book.
you.
And, you are here now able to have these conversations, and that is testament to your hard work and your strength. I'm very grateful to you for joining us, Tia Levings.
Thank you.
I'm Anthony Davis. Don't forget to support me and independent journalism at patreon.com/5Minute News or by joining the 5 Minute News YouTube channel. And I'll come back next Sunday with a brand new special guest and more factual news to discuss on the 5 Minute News Weekend Show with Midas Touch.